The morning light filtered through the crystal dome of the Galactic Academy as students from dozens of worlds hurried to their classes. Professor Kintar stood at the front of the theoretical physics classroom, his tall crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. His three eyes moved independently as he watched his students settle into their seats. David sat in the back row, his simple human form looking almost primitive compared to his classmates. To his left, Nira adjusted her breathing apparatus, her gray skin glistening with the methane mist that kept her alive. Her forearms moved gracefully as she prepared her note-taking device. Across the room, Kef's massive, rocky form scraped against his reinforced chair, small pebbles falling to the floor with each movement. The silicon-based creature's orange glow pulsed slowly as he powered up his internal systems. Near the front, Yil floated in her mobile water tank, her translucent blue form rippling with bioluminescent patterns. Her delicate fins pressed against the glass as she communicated with her tank's computer through electrical impulses. Around the room, other alien students prepared for class in their own unique ways. Some plugged into charging stations, others adjusted atmospheric controls, and a few began complex meditation rituals. Professor Kintar's voice resonated through the room with a sound like wind chimes. "Today we will explore energy conversion and efficiency," he announced, his crystals shifting to a deeper blue color. "As you know, survival requires energy, and energy requires sources. Each species has developed unique methods to harness and convert energy for basic needs." The students activated their recording devices, tentacles, claws, and appendages moving across control surfaces. David simply pulled out a paper notebook and a writing instrument, earning curious glances from nearby classmates. Paper was considered an ancient curiosity by most galactic civilizations, something only primitive worlds still used. "Your assignment," Professor Kantar continued, "is to calculate the energy requirements for the most efficient method your species uses to generate heat for survival. I want complete mathematical proofs, energy conversion rates, and efficiency ratings. This is not a simple task, as you must consider your homeworld's environmental conditions, atmospheric composition, and available resources." Nira's breathing apparatus hissed as she processed the information. Her homeworld of Methanos had violent storms that her people had learned to harness for energy. The calculations would require modeling atmospheric pressure changes, gas composition variations, and storm intensity patterns. She would need to contact the weather prediction centers on her homeworld and use their quantum computers to run the simulations. Kef's rocky form vibrated with a low rumble that served as his species' equivalent of a sigh. His people, the Lithani, drew heat from their planet's molten core through complex biomechanical interfaces. The calculations would involve geothermal dynamics, mineral composition analysis, and heat transfer coefficients through different rock types. He would need access to geological surveys and thermal mapping data from his homeworld. Yil's tank flickered with rapid light patterns as she considered the challenge. Her aquatic species used bioelectrical heating systems that converted chemical energy from deep-sea thermal vents into usable heat. The mathematics would require understanding of electrochemical processes, thermal conductivity in liquid environments, and the complex biology of her species' energy conversion organs. Around the room, other students began discussing the complexity of their assignments. The Zephyrites would need to model solar wind capture and conversion. The crystallines would have to calculate photon absorption rates and energy storage in their mineral matrices. The Void Dwellers would need to analyze dark matter interactions and exotic energy harvesting techniques. "This assignment will require considerable research," Professor Kantar warned. "You will need to consult your homeworld databases, use advanced computational systems, and possibly collaborate with research facilities across the galaxy. The mathematics alone will challenge your understanding of energy physics." Students began forming study groups, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of sounds, lights, and electromagnetic pulses. Nira's methane hiss mixed with Kef's rocky grinding while Yale's bioluminescent flashes responded to the electrical humming of the crystal lines. David sat quietly, making notes in his primitive paper book. His classmates assumed he was writing down contact information for human research facilities or planning his approach to the complex calculations. They expected him to struggle with the assignment, given humanity's reputation as a relatively young species with limited technological development. The due date is in 3 solar cycles, Professor Kintar announced. Given the complexity of the calculations and the need to coordinate with your homeworlds, this should provide adequate time for thorough research and analysis. As the class ended, students began immediate preparations for their research. Nira activated her long-distance communication array to contact atmospheric scientists on Methanos. Kef connected to the Lithani Geological Survey Network to request thermal imaging data. Yil began composing requests for biochemical analysis reports from her homeworlds. Research institutes. David simply closed his notebook and stood to leave. Toke, his 4-armed insectoid roommate, approached him with concern. "Are you not worried about the assignment?" Toke asked, his translator converting his chittering sounds into Galactic Standard. "The other students are already mobilizing research teams and requesting computational resources. I'll have it done by tomorrow," David replied casually, shouldering his simple bag. Toke's compound eyes widened in confusion. "Tomorrow? But the mathematical modeling alone should take a full solar cycle. How will you access the computational power needed for environmental simulations?" David smiled, an expression that always puzzled his alien classmates. "I don't think I'll need much computation for this one." As David walked away, Toke watched him go with growing bewilderment. Around the classroom, other students continued their frantic preparations, contacting research facilities, scheduling time on quantum computers, and organizing data analysis teams. The assignment was clearly one of the most challenging they had received, requiring coordination across multiple worlds and access to some of the most advanced computational resources in the galaxy. Yet the humans seemed completely unconcerned, as if the assignment required nothing more than a simple calculation. Toke wondered if David truly understood the complexity of what Professor Kintar was asking, or if humanity's primitive technology had left him unprepared for the advanced mathematical modeling required. The crystalline professor remained in the classroom, his form flickering with anticipation. In his centuries of teaching, he had never seen students work so hard on a single assignment. The energy calculations required for survival heating systems were among the most complex in theoretical physics, involving multiple variables, environmental factors, and species-specific biological requirements. He was particularly curious about what the human would present. Humanity was still considered a developing species, their technology crude compared to the sophisticated systems used by older galactic civilizations. Their approach to the assignment would likely reveal much about their species' scientific capabilities and their understanding of advanced energy physics. The dormitory corridors buzzed with activity as alien students rushed between their rooms and research facilities. Communication arrays hummed with data transmissions to distant homeworlds, while quantum computers processed complex environmental models. David walked calmly through the chaos, his simple bag slung over his shoulder. Seemingly unbothered by the frantic energy surrounding him, Toke scuttled alongside him, his 4 arms gesturing frantically. "David, you must understand the magnitude of this assignment," the insectoid insisted, his translator working overtime to keep up with his rapid speech. "Nira has already contacted 3 atmospheric research stations on Methanos. Kef is requesting geological surveys from 17 different mining facilities. Yil has submitted formal requests to 4 separate biochemical research institutes." David nodded politely as they entered their shared dormitory room. The space was a study in contrasts, with Toke's side filled with advanced technological devices, holographic displays, and complex mathematical instruments. David's side contained simple furniture, paper books, and what appeared to be primitive tools and materials. "And what have you prepared for your research?" Toke asked, watching as David set down his bag and pulled out a few basic items. David smiled and reached into his bag, withdrawing a simple wooden stick and some dried organic matter. Toke's compound eyes focused on the objects with confusion. What are these primitive artifacts? He asked, his translator struggling to find appropriate terms for what it was processing. Research materials, David replied simply. Setting the items on his desk next to a physical book with pages made of processed plant matter, Toke approached cautiously, his antennae twitching with curiosity. Are these ceremonial objects? Religious? Artifacts? I do not understand their relevance to energy calculation and thermal generation. David opened the book, revealing pages covered with symbols and diagrams. This is a chemistry textbook, he explained. It contains the basic principles I need for the calculation. The insectoid examined the book with growing bewilderment. This is your computational device? These flat surfaces with markings? Where are the processors? The quantum matrices? The data storage crystals? It's not a computer, David said patiently. It's a book. The information is stored in the markings and I process it with my brain. Toke's entire body shuddered with confusion. You intend to perform the necessary calculations using only your biological neural network? Without technological augmentation? The environmental modeling alone would require processing power equivalent to a small star. David pulled out a handheld device roughly the size of his palm. This calculator should handle the math I need. The device was so primitive that Toke initially mistook it for a decorative object. That is your computational system? It appears to have less processing power than a food preparation unit. It's sufficient for basic arithmetic, David said, settling into his chair and opening the textbook to a specific section across the room. Toke connected to his own research network, his advanced neural interface allowing him to access databases across the galaxy simultaneously. Holographic displays materialized around him, showing complex molecular diagrams, energy conversion formulas, and environmental simulation models. His species, the Cathani, had developed sophisticated biomechanical heating systems that required intricate understanding of both organic chemistry and quantum mechanics. I am correlating atmospheric pressure data from 47 different monitoring stations, Toke announced, his multiple arms manipulating various controls. My homeworld's environmental conditions require precise calculations involving gas mixture, ratios, pressure differentials, and thermal conductivity coefficients. David nodded absently, making notes in his book with a simple writing instrument. The contrast was stark. While Toke's research involved real-time data from multiple worlds, quantum processors, and holographic modeling systems, David worked with nothing more advanced than processed wood pulp and chemical ink. The Cathani heating system operates through controlled biomechanical processes. Toke continued, displaying a three-dimensional model of his species' internal heating organs. We convert atmospheric gases into thermal energy through a series of chemical reactions that must be precisely balanced. The mathematical modeling requires quantum-level analysis of molecular interactions. David looked up from his book with interest. That sounds complex. How much energy does it require to start the process? Approximately 847 standard energy units for initial activation. Toke replied, plus continuous monitoring and adjustment through our neural interfaces. The system must be calibrated constantly to maintain optimal efficiency. David mused, returning to his reading. Toke watched his roommate work with growing concern. David, are you certain you understand the scope of this assignment? Professor, Kintar expects detailed mathematical proofs, energy conversion analyses, and efficiency calculations. Your research methods appear insufficient for such complex requirements. I'm just looking up the basic chemical formula, David replied, pointing to a simple equation in his book. The math is pretty straightforward once you understand the process. The insectoid's confusion deepened. Chemical formula? Are you researching some form of artificial chemical heating system? Does humanity possess advanced chemical manipulation technology? David chuckled, a sound that always puzzled his alien classmates. Not exactly advanced, no. More like the opposite. Throughout the dormitory, other students worked frantically on their assignments. In the room above, Mira's methane processing systems hummed as she analyzed atmospheric data from her homeworld storm systems. Her calculations involved modeling the complex interactions between methane molecules, atmospheric pressure changes, and her species' specialized breathing apparatus. Down the corridor, Kef's massive form remained motionless for hours as he processed geological data through his internal systems. The Lithani's calculations required understanding of planetary core dynamics, mineral composition analysis, and thermal transfer rates through different types of rock formations. In the aquatic wing, Yill's bioelectrical systems flickered with rapid data processing as she analyzed the complex biochemistry of her species' heating mechanisms. Her calculations involved electrochemical processes, thermal conductivity in liquid environments, and the intricate biology of thermal energy conversion. Each species had developed heating systems that reflected their unique evolutionary paths and environmental challenges. The Zephyrites had mastered solar wind capture and conversion, requiring calculations involving plasma physics and electromagnetic field manipulation. The Crystallines had developed photon absorption systems that demanded understanding of quantum optics and energy storage in crystalline matrices. As the evening progressed, Toke watched David continue his simple research with growing amazement. The human had spent less than an hour reviewing his primitive book and making basic calculations on his rudimentary device. Meanwhile, other students worked through the night, their advanced systems processing vast amounts of data and performing complex environmental simulations. "Have you completed your calculations?" Toke asked, observing that David had closed his book and set aside his simple tools. "Just about," David replied. "I need to gather a few materials for the demonstration. Tomorrow." "Demonstration?" Toke's antennae twitched with surprise. "Are you planning to show a holographic model of your species' heating system?" David stood and walked to a storage container, retrieving several pieces of dried organic matter. "Something like that. I'll need to show how the process actually works." Toke examined the materials with his advanced sensors, detecting only basic carbon compounds and simple organic molecules. These appear to be dead plant matter. "What is their relevance?" "To thermal energy generation?" "They're fuel," David said simply. "Fuel?" Toke's translator struggled with the concept. "Do you mean energy storage medium? Are these some form of biological energy cells?" David smiled again, that mysterious expression that seemed to indicate hidden knowledge. "You could say that. They store energy that can be released when needed." The insectoid's confusion reached new heights. "How do you extract the energy? What conversion process do you use? Where is the extraction equipment?" "I'll show you tomorrow," David said, settling into his sleeping area. "The demonstration should make everything clear." As Toke continued his research through the night, processing data from multiple worlds and running complex simulations, he wondered about his human roommate's mysterious confidence. David's approach to the assignment seemed impossibly simple, almost primitive compared to the sophisticated methods used by other galactic civilizations, yet something in the human's manner suggested knowledge that Toke couldn't understand. There was a quiet confidence in David's approach that implied deeper understanding rather than ignorance. The insectoid found himself curious about what the human would present, even as he doubted that such simple methods could possibly address the complex requirements of Professor Kentar's assignment. The theoretical physics classroom filled with nervous energy as students prepared for their presentations. Advanced holographic projectors hummed to life, quantum computers processed final calculations, and communication arrays maintained connections to research facilities across the galaxy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with electromagnetic fields from dozens of different technological systems. Professor Kintar's crystalline form had shifted to a deep purple, indicating his serious mood. As he prepared to evaluate what he expected to be some of the most complex energy calculations ever attempted by students, his three eyes moved independently, tracking the various preparations around the room. Nira stood at her presentation station, her gray skin glistening with methane mist as she made final adjustments to her atmospheric simulation. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional model of her homeworld, complete with swirling methane storms and atmospheric pressure readings. Complex mathematical equations floated around the model, each one representing hours of intensive calculation. Kef's massive rocky form had positioned itself near the geological projection system, his orange glow pulsing steadily as he processed the final data from his homeworld's mining surveys. The thermal imaging displays showed cross-sections of his planet's crust, with heat flow patterns and mineral composition analysis creating a dizzying array of scientific data. Yill's water tank had been connected to a bioelectrical interface, allowing her to project her species' complex heating system analysis directly into the classroom's holographic display. The biochemical diagrams showed intricate molecular processes and energy conversion pathways that would challenge even advanced scientists. David sat calmly in his usual seat, a simple cloth bag beside him containing his mysterious materials. While his classmates made final adjustments to their advanced presentation systems, he simply reviewed a few handwritten notes in his primitive paper notebook. "We will begin with the atmospheric specialists," Professor Kantar announced, his voice resonating through the room. "Nira, please present your analysis of methane storm energy harvesting." Nira approached the presentation area, her forearms moving gracefully as she activated her holographic display. The three-dimensional model of Methanos appeared, showing the violent storms that raged across her homeworld's surface. "My people have developed atmospheric processors that extract thermal energy from methane storms," she began, her breathing apparatus translating her words into galactic standard. The mathematical equations filled the space around the planetary model, each one representing complex calculations involving atmospheric pressure, gas composition, and energy conversion rates. "The energy requirements for system activation are substantial," she continued, highlighting specific formulas. "Initial startup requires 2,847 standard energy units, with continuous power draw of 156 units per cycle to maintain optimal efficiency." The holographic display showed detailed breakdowns of the energy conversion process, including efficiency ratings, environmental impact assessments, and maintenance requirements. The system requires constant monitoring and adjustment based on storm intensity, atmospheric pressure changes, and seasonal variations in gas composition. Professor Kentar's crystals flickered with approval as he examined the complex calculations. "Excellent work, Nira. Your analysis demonstrates thorough understanding of atmospheric energy dynamics and conversion efficiency principles." Kef's turn came next, his rocky form moving slowly to the presentation area. "The Lithani heating system draws energy directly from our planet's molten core," he announced, his voice creating vibrations that resonated through the floor. The geological projection showed cross-sections of his homeworld, with thermal gradients and mineral composition analysis creating a complex three-dimensional map. The biomechanical interface requires precise understanding of geothermal dynamics and heat transfer coefficients. Kef continued, displaying equations that filled the entire holographic space. "Energy requirements for core connection establishment are 4,156 standard units, with efficiency ratings varying based on geological conditions and mineral composition." The presentation included detailed analysis of thermal conductivity through different rock types, seismic activity effects on energy transmission, and the complex biology of his species' internal heating systems. Maintenance and calibration require constant geological monitoring and adjustment of biomechanical interfaces. Other students followed with similarly complex presentations. The Zephyrite demonstrated their solar wind capture systems, requiring calculations involving plasma physics and electromagnetic field manipulation. The crystallines showed their photon absorption matrices, with quantum optics equations that challenged the limits of current scientific understanding. Each presentation followed the same pattern: incredibly complex systems requiring massive energy inputs, continuous monitoring, and sophisticated technological support. The mathematical proofs filled three-dimensional space with intricate formulas, and the energy requirements were enormous by any reasonable standard. Yill's presentation involved bioelectrical heating systems that converted chemical energy from deep-sea thermal vents into usable heat. Her calculations required understanding of electrochemical processes, thermal conductivity in liquid environments, and the complex biology of her species' energy conversion organs. The system activation requires 3,267 standard energy units. She explained, her bioluminescent patterns creating additional visual displays, with ongoing energy consumption of 289 units per cycle for optimal performance. Professor Kintar evaluated each presentation with growing satisfaction. The students had demonstrated mastery of advanced energy physics, complex mathematical modeling, and sophisticated understanding of their species' unique survival systems. The calculations were pushing the boundaries of current scientific knowledge, exactly as he had hoped. As the presentations continued, David remained quietly in his seat, occasionally glancing at his simple handwritten notes. His classmates had begun to notice his lack of preparation, whispering among themselves about the humans' apparent unpreparedness for such a complex assignment. Perhaps his species lacks the technological development necessary for such advanced calculations, one student suggested quietly. Or maybe he does not understand the complexity of what Professor Kintar is asking, another replied. The presentations continued with each species demonstrating increasingly sophisticated heating systems. The Void Dwellers showed their dark matter interaction systems, requiring exotic physics calculations that existed at the theoretical limits of current science. The energy beings demonstrated their quantum field manipulation techniques with mathematics that transcended normal three-dimensional space. Finally, Professor Kintar called the last name on his list. David, please present your analysis of human thermal generation systems. The classroom fell silent as David stood and walked to the front, carrying only his simple cloth bag and handwritten notes. His classmates watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern, expecting either a primitive presentation that would embarrass the human species or a confession that the assignment was beyond his capabilities. David set his bag on the presentation table and smiled at his classmates. Thank you, Professor Kintar. I'll be demonstrating the most efficient method my species uses to generate heat for survival. He reached into his bag and withdrew a simple wooden stick and some dried organic matter. The classroom watched in confused silence as David arranged these primitive materials on the presentation table. This is our heating system, David announced calmly, holding up the wooden stick. It requires no external energy input, no technological infrastructure, and no maintenance, beyond gathering readily available materials. The silence in the room was complete. After hours of presentations involving complex holographic displays, quantum computers, and sophisticated mathematical proofs, the human had presented two pieces of what appeared to be dead plant matter. Professor Kintar's crystals flickered with confusion. David, are you certain you understand the assignment? We are looking for mathematical analysis of energy requirements and conversion efficiency. I understand perfectly, David replied, his confidence unwavering. I'm about to demonstrate the most energy-efficient heating system ever developed by any species in this galaxy. The classroom held its breath as David began to work with his simple materials, preparing to show his classmates something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about survival, technology, and the relationship between complexity and effectiveness. David positioned the wooden stick against a flat piece of dried bark, holding both materials steady as he began to work. The classroom watched in complete silence as the human started moving the stick back and forth against the bark in a rapid, controlled motion. His movements were precise and rhythmic, the result of countless generations of human knowledge passed down through the simplest possible means. What you are witnessing, David said calmly, continuing his work, is the controlled initiation of rapid oxidation. The friction between these organic materials is generating heat at the molecular level, raising the temperature of the cellulose fibers until they reach their ignition point. Toke's compound eyes focused intently on the primitive display. You attempting to generate heat through mechanical friction? The energy output would be minimal compared to the energy input required for the motion. That's the beauty of it, David replied, his movements becoming more focused as small particles of wood began to accumulate at the friction point. The initial energy investment is minimal, but the chemical reaction that follows releases far more energy than we put into the system. Professor Kentar's crystals had shifted to a pale yellow, indicating his growing confusion. David, I fail to understand how mechanical friction between organic materials could constitute an efficient heating system. The thermodynamics appear fundamentally flawed. A thin wisp of smoke began to rise from the point where David worked the stick against the bark. His classmates leaned forward, their various visual organs focusing on the unexpected phenomenon. The smoke grew thicker, and a small red glow appeared in the accumulated wood particles. The chemical formula is quite simple, David explained, his voice steady despite the physical effort of his demonstration. Carbon plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide, water vapor, and energy. The energy release is what we call combustion, and it happens naturally when organic materials reach the right temperature in the presence of oxygen. Neera's breathing apparatus hissed with confusion. You're describing a chemical reaction, not a heating system. Where is the control mechanism? The monitoring equipment? The safety protocols? David carefully transferred the glowing particles to a small nest of dried organic fibers he had prepared. He blew gently on the materials, and suddenly a small flame appeared, dancing and flickering with orange light. The entire classroom recoiled in shock. The control mechanism is knowledge and practice, David said, feeding small pieces of dried organic matter to the growing flame. My species learned to control this reaction approximately 400,000 years ago. We call it fire. The flame grew larger as David added more material, casting dancing shadows across the crystalline walls of the classroom. The light was warm and alive, completely different from the cold technological illumination the alien students were accustomed to. Kef's rocky form vibrated with alarm. You have created an uncontrolled chemical reaction in the classroom. This appears extremely dangerous. It's completely controlled, David assured him, adjusting the flame by adding or removing organic material. Fire can be made larger or smaller, hotter or cooler, simply by controlling the fuel supply and oxygen flow. It can be extinguished instantly by removing either fuel or oxygen. Yill's bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly in her water tank. What are the energy requirements for this system? What infrastructure is needed? What are the maintenance protocols? David smiled, the flame reflecting in his eyes. The energy requirement for initiation is whatever physical effort I just demonstrated. The infrastructure needed is 2 sticks and some dry organic matter. The maintenance protocol is adding fuel when needed and removing it when not. The silence in the classroom was deafening as the implications began to sink in. Professor Kentar's crystals flickered through several colors as he processed what he was witnessing. Are you suggesting that this combustion reaction requires no external energy input beyond the initial friction? Correct, David confirmed. Once initiated, the reaction is self-sustaining as long as fuel and oxygen are available. The energy output far exceeds the energy input, making it incredibly efficient. But where does the energy come from? Toke asked, his scientific mind struggling to understand the process. From the sun, David replied simply. Plants capture solar energy through photosynthesis and store it in their cellular structure. When we burn organic matter, we're releasing that stored solar energy as heat and light. The alien students exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of confusion and amazement. The human had described a process that seemed to violate everything they understood about energy systems and technological development. Let me show you the mathematics, David said, pulling out his simple handheld calculator. The chemical equation for cellulose combustion shows that each gram of organic matter releases approximately 16,000 joules of energy. A small handful of dried plant material contains enough energy to heat a human body for several hours. He punched numbers into his primitive calculator, the simple device performing basic arithmetic that revealed the stunning efficiency of the process. Compare that to the energy requirements your species describe. Your systems require thousands of standard energy units just for activation, plus continuous power for maintenance and monitoring. The flame continued to burn steadily, requiring no technological support, no external power source, and no complex maintenance procedures. David demonstrated its versatility by making the flame larger with more fuel, smaller with less fuel, and eventually extinguishing it completely by removing all combustible material. The scalability is unlimited, David continued. This same process can heat a single individual or an entire settlement. It can cook food, work metals, provide light and darkness, and ward off dangerous animals. It requires no rare materials, no advanced technology, and no specialized training beyond basic knowledge of fire safety. Professor Kentar's voice carried a note of awe. Are you telling us that your species solved the fundamental survival problem of thermal generation using nothing more than organic materials and controlled chemical reactions? Yes, David replied matter-of-factly. Fire gave humans the ability to survive in virtually any environment on our planet. We could migrate to cold climates, cook previously inedible foods, extend our active hours into darkness, and reshape our environment to suit our needs. The classroom fell silent again as the students contemplated the implications. Their species had developed incredibly sophisticated technologies to solve the heating problem, requiring massive infrastructure, continuous power supplies, and complex maintenance procedures. The human had demonstrated a solution that was simultaneously more primitive and more advanced than anything they had imagined. Naira's breathing apparatus hissed softly. Your species learned to carry portable destruction with them. You mastered the ability to initiate controlled chemical reactions anywhere, anytime, using only materials found in nature. That's one way to look at it, David agreed. We learned to harness one of the most fundamental chemical processes in the universe. Fire doesn't just provide heat, it transforms materials, creates tools, and enables technologies that would be impossible without it. Kef's rocky form had gone completely still. You're describing a technology that makes your species independent of any external infrastructure. You can survive in environments that would kill most other species simply by initiating combustion reactions. Fire is the foundation of human civilization, David explained. Without it, we would still be limited to tropical environments, eating only foods we could digest raw, and vulnerable to predators and environmental conditions. Fire made us the dominant species on our planet. The flame had burned out, leaving only a small pile of ash and the lingering smell of smoke. The demonstration was complete, but its impact on the classroom was just beginning to be understood. David had shown them something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about technology, survival, and the relationship between complexity and effectiveness. Yale's bioluminescent patterns had slowed to a steady pulse. The energy efficiency is extraordinary. Your species achieved thermal independence using only materials available in any natural environment. And the most important aspect, David said, packing his simple materials back into his bag, is that fire is knowledge, not technology. Once you understand the principles, you can create it anywhere, anytime, using whatever organic materials are available. It's a solution that travels with you, requires no maintenance, and never becomes obsolete. The silence that followed was profound as the alien students struggled to comprehend what they had witnessed. The human had not just solved the assignment. He had revealed a fundamental truth about survival, adaptability, and the power of elegant simplicity in the face of complex challenges. The classroom remained frozen in absolute silence for what felt like an eternity. The small pile of ash where David's flame had burned seemed to hold the attention of every alien student, as if the simple remains of combustion contained secrets that their advanced civilizations had never discovered. Professor Kentar's crystalline form had shifted to a deep, contemplative blue, his three eyes moving independently as he processed the implications of what he had witnessed. Nir was the first to break the silence, her breathing apparatus releasing a long, slow hiss. Your species learned to remake the environment around them, she whispered, her forearms trembling slightly. While we develop technology to adapt ourselves to our world, You developed the ability to adapt your world to yourselves. David nodded simply, as if the observation was obvious. Fire gave us the power to transform our surroundings rather than just survive in them. We could make hostile environments habitable, turn inedible materials into food, and create warmth where none existed naturally. Kef's massive rocky form had begun to glow more brightly, his internal systems working overtime to process the revelation. The mathematical elegance is beyond anything we calculated, he rumbled, his voice carrying undertones of awe. Your energy input approaches zero, your infrastructure requirement is zero, your maintenance cost is zero, yet your energy output is theoretically unlimited. And the materials are everywhere, Yil added, her bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly in her water tank. Every world with organic life contains the fuel for your heating system. You are not dependent on specific atmospheric conditions, geological formations, or rare elements. Toke's compound eyes had been fixed on the ash pile since the demonstration ended. We approached the assignment as a problem of energy conversion efficiency, he said slowly. But you approached it as a problem of environmental mastery. The difference is profound. Professor Kantar finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of teaching experience. In all my years of instruction, I have never encountered a species that solved the fundamental survival challenge through controlled destruction. Your people learned to harness chaos itself as a tool for creation. David considered this observation carefully. I never thought of it as controlling chaos. To us, fire is simply another natural process, like gravity or magnetism. We learn to understand it, predict it, and use it for our benefit. But that is precisely what makes it remarkable, Professor Kantar continued, his crystals shifting to a warmer hue. Every other species in this classroom developed heating systems that require complex technology, sophisticated materials, and continuous energy inputs. Your species developed something that transcends technology entirely. The other students began to understand the deeper implications of what they had witnessed. Their heating systems, no matter how sophisticated, were ultimately dependent on their home civilizations. Remove them from their technological infrastructure and they would be helpless in hostile environments. The human had demonstrated a capability that made his species fundamentally independent. The strategic implications are staggering, Nira observed, her scientific mind beginning to grasp the broader picture. Your species can establish settlements anywhere, survive in any environment, and maintain independence from technological supply chains. You carry the foundation of civilization with you wherever you go. David pulled out his simple paper notebook and calculator, the primitive tools that had seemed so inadequate compared to his classmates' advanced systems. These are the only tools I needed for the entire calculation. The energy mathematics for fire are simple enough that any human can understand them. We don't need quantum computers or research facilities to solve basic survival problems. Kef's rocky form vibrated with what might have been laughter. We mobilized research teams, contacted multiple worlds, and used computational resources equivalent to small cities. You used a book made of dead trees and a calculator with less processing power than our food preparation devices. The knowledge is distributed, David explained. Every human knows how to make fire or can learn it quickly. We don't need specialists or advanced degrees or technological support. The capability is embedded in our culture, passed down through generations by simple demonstration. Professor Kantar's voice carried new respect. Your species has achieved something that advanced civilizations often lose, the ability to solve fundamental problems with fundamental solutions. We have become so sophisticated that we forgot the power of simplicity. The silence returned, but now it was different. Instead of confusion and bewilderment, it was the silence of deep contemplation. The alien students were beginning to understand why humans were simultaneously considered primitive and terrifying by galactic standards. You are not just survivors, Yil said softly, her bioluminescent patterns slow and thoughtful. You are environmental conquerors. You don't adapt to worlds, you make worlds adapt to you. Fire was just the beginning, David confirmed. Once we mastered controlled combustion, we developed metallurgy, which led to tools, which led to agriculture, which led to civilization. Every major human advancement traces back to our ability to control fire. Toke's translator worked overtime as he processed rapid bursts of excitement. Your species developed technology by starting with the most fundamental energy process in the universe. You built civilization from the ground up, literally beginning with fire and expanding outward. While we developed increasingly complex solutions to specific problems, Nira added, your species developed increasingly simple solutions to fundamental challenges. The result is a form of technological independence that we cannot match. Professor. Kintar's crystals had begun to pulse with a rhythm that indicated deep thought. I am beginning to understand why your species is called Deathworlders. It is not just because you come from a hostile planet. It is because you learn to carry that hostility with you, to project it outward and reshape reality according to your needs. The term Deathworlder had always puzzled the alien students. They had assumed it referred to humans' ability to survive in dangerous environments. Now they were beginning to understand that it described something far more profound. The ability to make any environment deadly to those who oppose them. Fire is not just a heating system, David said, his voice carrying the weight of species history. It is a weapon, a tool, a source of light, a means of communication, and a foundation for every technology that followed. We learned to control the force that could destroy us, and that control became the basis for everything we built. The ash pile had grown cold, but its significance continued to resonate through the classroom. The simple remains of combustion represented something that none of the alien civilizations had achieved, the mastery of fundamental forces through elegant simplicity. Your mathematics were not incomplete, Professor Kantar observed, his voice carrying admiration. They were perfect. You solved the energy efficiency problem so completely that there was nothing left to calculate. Zero input, unlimited output, universal availability. As the class period drew to a close, the students began to pack their advanced equipment and shut down their sophisticated systems. David simply closed his notebook and returned his calculator to his bag. The same simple tools that had seemed so inadequate at the beginning of the assignment. I have one final question, Professor Kantar said, his crystals shifting to a deep purple indicating serious inquiry. What other fundamental problems has your species solved through such elegant simplicity? David smiled, that mysterious human expression that his classmates were beginning to understand indicated vast reserves of hidden knowledge. Professor, if you think fire is impressive, wait until you hear about what we did with sharp rocks and pointy sticks. The classroom fell silent once more as the alien students contemplated the implications of that statement. They had witnessed a demonstration that challenged everything they thought they knew about technology, survival, and the relationship between complexity and effectiveness. The human had not just completed the assignment. He had revealed the fundamental difference between species that adapted to their environment and species that adapted their environment to themselves. As students began to leave the classroom, they moved with the slow, careful steps of beings whose worldview had been fundamentally altered. The human had shown them something that would change how they understood not just heating systems, but the nature of civilization itself. Professor Kantar remained in the classroom long after the students had gone, his crystals flickering through various colors as he processed the day's events. In his centuries of teaching, he had never encountered a species that solved complex problems through such profound simplicity. The human had demonstrated something that transcended mere technological advancement. The mastery of fundamental forces through elegant understanding. The pile of ash sat cold and forgotten on the presentation table, but its significance would resonate through the Galactic Academy for years to come. The day a Deathworlder showed an advanced alien class the power of controlled destruction, and in doing so, revealed why humanity was the most adaptable and dangerous species in the galaxy.